And a lot of times that means other guilds and other people control the narrative about us, because we don't really do a good job of doing that about ourselves. So everybody inside of Hostile is usually really fucking happy. We take care of our players. We have for years and multiple different games. We have long-standing players, personal friends who've been with us for a long time. Our players meet up in real life and shit like that. So it's a really close-knit community, and for us, what keeps that healthy is paying more attention to like the vibes and like what's going on between players than necessarily like skill levels and stuff like that. And that's why for us, I mean, we would rather have a guild like Rule Zero than Relevant because of just that. So if you have a chance, go ahead and reach out to Lilith Rose. And but as far as I'm concerned, I could care less. You seem like a good player.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'll message her. I don't think I have her on Discord, so I don't really know how I'm gonna be able to message her. Unless
she doesn't
she's
have you
in
blocked
the-
in game, does she?
I don't know. I'm not even online on game. I've been having computer problems all day, so
Oh shit! Everything at once.
yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. If you get a chance, get in touch with her. Let me know if she responds, or whatever. And I mean, if need be, I can try to help facilitate it on Discord. But I don't imagine if you messaged her in game that she wouldn't message you back.
Yeah, I'll try. It's just fucking. I think it's Revelations that's been messing with my computer all day. So, well, for the past few days. So I've been trying to like mess with stuff.
Gotcha. She's normally a sweetheart, but in the past couple of weeks, she's been having a hard time. There was a big family tragedy that just happened recently. So hopefully she responds okay.
All right. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, as far as everything else, I don't know. I'm sorry about what's going on in there. All I can tell you is that everybody that's in like our officers and myself and Gloria personally, we're really professional with our players, and you wouldn't have to worry about anything like that in Hostile. So I'm sorry that's going on. I know that it can be really shitty.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just a lot of stuff is going on. I don't know what's going on with Jericho, if there's anything going on like in real life or what, but I have no idea. He's just been way too like unprofessional here lately. And it's just like this whole I think he's taking this game like way too seriously sometimes.
You would not believe the messages that I get from him.
Yeah. I don't know. It's pretty crazy. He's been really like overly pissed off here lately.
I mean, I understand, but at the same time, it's kind of like it's a game, and you have to take it at the pace you're capable of taking it at. I and my players lucked out in that we, through organization and bringing a lot of people that had played the game in China already. So, do you know anything about Hostile at all?
No.
All right. So, before, I mean, I don't even know if you would even be interested in joining us after you heard this stuff. But I can't imagine it would deter you or whatever. Just to kind of explain a little bit about us, I don't know how much time you have. We formed a couple of years ago.
You didn't.
Gloria and I have been leading and putting together Hostile. Lucine in game. I don't know if you know anything about him. He's a surgeon. He moved here from mainland China. He practices in northern New York. Sweet guy. Plays the game really hard. So he and I are really good friends, and we co-lead in games, and we take turns choosing games for our community. So and leading. So in the last game that we played, I led all 3 guilds, and then he wanted to play Revelation, and so did like a lot of the players that were like his core that were Chinese, Mandarin speaking. So because of like the interests of our Chinese players in this game, we chose this one, and wasn't my first choice, but I've enjoyed it. We've been having fun, and then the next game we're looking at I'm thinking either Ashes of Creation, or I'm not really sure. But our goal in forming Hostile essentially was to create like a, I don't know, like an international, multilingual, multi-game community, right? And eventually move into like esports and sponsorships and that kind of thing. So
Nice.
yeah, we're trying to put together the foundation and everything, and things have been going really well. But so for us, like, I don't know, kind of have like this philosophy or something that so I guess it doesn't matter like how much money you put into a game, right? Or like how much time or work or practice you put into a game. Eventually, a new game is going to come along. Like every server, every game has a beginning and it has an end, and a lifespan. Like, this game will die. The server will die, and eventually a bigger game, a better game will come along, and a lot of the players are going to move on into it. And so when that happens, the work and the time and the money that you put into this game, or whatever game you're playing, is not really going to have any value in the next game that you play. So inevitably, the only real value that you can actually sustain in any of these games are like the people that you meet in them, worth like bringing with you to the next game, worth playing the next game with. And so for us, that's all we do. We look for people. We look for players. We look for people to integrate into our community, try to make the community fertile soil for all of our players to want to keep playing. We're like successful in pretty much everything we do in every game. We make sure that we, you know, secure all of the contested resources that we can, that we secure like every advantage for our players that we can, that we make our players as happy as possible. We do events. We make decisions together as a community. And all in all, like it's a good formula. And for us, the whole like, I guess, admixture of the different language groups and communities too, what that does is there's something, I don't really know how to explain it. Like there's something that happens when like you're trying to communicate with somebody that speaks a different language to you, and in that difficulty, the act of you reaching out to communicate with them, like somehow makes that connection, that conversation, like you invest more into it. You personally like have to make more effort in communicating with them, and it makes it more rewarding when you achieve that communication, whether you have to use Google Translate or you're both like, you know, laughing and then tripping over your words and stuff. And what ends up happening is we have channels and groups of players, Brazilians who speak very little English, and English players from the Philippines and Singapore, and channels with players from, you know, Australia and Peru and Argentina, and these groups of players, like these surprising connections just sort of like crop up, and people, it's just like a more, I don't know, in an MMO, when part of the reason people are playing these games in the first place is to make these connections with players. It makes it, from what we've seen anyways, that much more profound or enjoyable or rewarding or whatever. So and outside of just having like a diversity of players, as far as like, you know, language groups and cultures and religions and that kind of thing, we also have a diversity of play styles. We, in the beginning, went out of our way to just get as many hardcore players as possible. In the previous games that we played, we just wanted like the best players we could find. And what we found was that didn't work. Period. Like full stop. Something happens when you fill an entire guild full of like the top players on the server, or all of the best players. The groups, the players separate into cliques like mixed oil, and they don't connect with each other. They have little feuds and they talk shit to each other in competitions, and it's just doesn't seem to work. But when you have sort of like they're like big trees whose roots are crowding each other, if that makes any sense. But if you mix up the groups of players, if you have hardcore and casual and like semi-hardcore and something, it's almost like this like an ecosystem of players. And the hardcore players make friends with these players in the guild, and it's more rewarding. They feel like appreciated or like revered or respected or whatever by all of like our casual and like our semi hardcore players have really hardcore players to look up to and learn from, and then maybe become more hardcore, and it just it seems to work out better. So our alliance, our guild, we have just kind of a mix of everything, and as a result, you know, we have a lot of players that came from Relevant, for instance, and in order to combat Hostile, in many ways, I feel like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but in many ways, Relevant was a reaction to Hostile. And a lot of their players that came to us shared the exact same complaint. And the complaint was that all of this, like, they would have a Discord, and all of the statics, like, nobody went into the Relevant Discord, that all of them split apart into their own static Discords and never really hung out with each other, never befriended each other, never communicated with each other. And for new players, it made for, like, a really unwelcoming environment, and it was almost impossible to connect with anyone or make new friends in the guild. And that's exactly what we experienced when we just tried to have, like, a bunch of hardcore members. So, like, I don't know, we managed to do really well with a big mixed group, and Hostile has a lot more casual players and is a lot more lenient than I think a lot of the other guilds realize.
Yeah, definitely. And plus, like, you guys actually cap fucking castles?
Yeah, there's that.
I mean, fucking, I don't know.
It works, I mean.
Yeah. Jericho's, like, delusional as fuck. I mean,
he has everything. Like, what surprises me is that at this point in the game, right now,
yeah,
you guys have all of the pieces in place, but it just doesn't seem to be,
no.
like, I don't know. It's like you have all the pieces to the puzzle, but, like, you're trying to shove them together and force them together in ways that don't fit. And, like, you have, with Addiction and SSGT, they're strong guilds. They're strong communities. We've played, our players and us, we've gone head to head with these communities in previous games. Their leadership, like Cronian and others, are like, we respect them. I mean, it's really hard. I don't know if you have experience with, like, Brazilian communities specifically, but I have entire Brazilian communities and guilds inside of the Hostile Alliance, like our community, that have merged in, and different cultures approach life differently, right? But that also bleeds into everything else they do. They approach the relationship with work is different. The relationship with authority is different. The relationship, with family is different. School and inevitably with video games, right? And you find like patterns and commonalities between the ways that different cultures and societies relate to video games and approach video games and play them. And what I've observed in the Brazilian community is that, one, like, they play these games for fun, and they play these games incredibly communally. And by that I mean they're just looking to play with a whole bunch of friends and have fun. And whereas, you look at, like, a lot of players from, like, that are ethnically Chinese or from China, they play these games in a much more structured, organized, almost like a work-like way, and efficient. And so then you see different variances in North American communities and others as well. But for Brazilian players, I know that it can be really difficult to impose a lot of structure and organization and that kind of stuff onto these groups of players. And so for me, when I see, like, SSGT as a community that's been together for almost a decade bring that level of structure and organization and like, respect to a community after that long, that's a community that I have respect for, and that I hope to I don't know, have the same kind of success with my players. And so, like, you have, like, Aggression has really good allies. They have really skilled players. They've picked up really good players from Relevant. And the only thing that I see as, like, a shortcoming is the same sort of failing that I've seen. And, I mean, you have an inside perspective, so correct me if you feel like I'm wrong. But I've seen this happen repeatedly, where, perfect example. Did you play in closed beta?
I did the first one, but after that, then I didn't.
Okay. And I'm sorry if I'm, like, talking your head off, by the way.
That's okay.
So, in closed beta, there's a guild called Zero Fucks. It was the name Allegiance had already been taken by another guild, but the community was called Allegiance. Allegiance, Zero Fucks, had inside of them, like, a group of players who had contested Hostile in a previous game and quit that game because of us. Resented, you know, like, we were really successful in everything, like, we, you know, PvP events and contested resources, world bosses, all that fun stuff. And like, they harassed our players, threw a fit, doxed our players, released their information online, and called their homes and their workplace and stuff like that. It was just all kinds of bullshit. Racist messages, everything. Our Brazilian players, our Chinese players. So we didn't see them again until we came into closed beta, and we saw those players in Zero Fucks. And, like, after, like, through contesting us, there was, like, problems. The community destabilized. They fell apart, and there was a player. I don't know if you know who Fear is. He was the leader of Wrath. He's Chinese. He had a group of players who were part of his core, really skilled. They had approached Hostile in closed beta and asked to basically, like, they wanted to join our community, but their goal was kind of limited to Revelation Online. What they wanted was, like, them joining us came with a caveat, and it was that they get to control, like, they get to send their static, their 10 players, Fear's static, to all of the world bosses, and basically they would each get pick of the gems, and then Hostile would get everything that was left, right? And they would be like our boss team or something like that. And so we were like, well, no, like, we're not interested in that. And so he basically said, well, he would be taking those bosses with or without us, and if we didn't, like, accept his terms or whatever, he was, like, flustered. And I'm not gonna lie, like, we didn't just turn him away. We actually tried to be like, well, I mean, do you think that's fair? Can we compromise on this or that? And he just, you know, that's what he wanted, and he wouldn't take anything less. So he ended up, when Allegiance fell apart, his static and the players from Zero Fucks merged and made Wrath in closed beta, and they censored everything around contesting us, the world bosses, fighting us. They went after our players personally. And then what happens, right? So we're, like, bar none, the strongest community in this game. I'm not trying to, like, toot our own horn or whatever, but so we went after them really hard. The community, you know, they couldn't get contested resources, but they also had a hard time in everything else, like clan wars and Scour. Our players were going after them because their players were going after us, and inevitably that community then destabilized. By the time open beta came around, and, you know, there was more failings and there was more leadership problems, they fell apart. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because, like, Relevant, who I have a lot of respect. I have respect for DMOC. I have respect for a ton of the, like, Winter, most of their core, fantastic, skillful players that, like, I would have, to be honest, like, I would have been really happy or honored to have them in our community. But something happened, and it was something that I warned DMOC about before taking in the Wrath players, and it was that, like, as he brought in the Wrath players, DMOC and I had a conversation, and I told him that my concern was basically that all of the toxicity that had broken apart Allegiance and Zero Fucks, that had broken apart Wrath, would then be absorbed into Relevant. And that when that happened, Relevant would stop being like the small hardcore group focused on like progression focused group, PvE content, like, and they would become the guild that would take up the banner, like fighting hostile and villainizing hostile and rallying the server against hostile. And in that act, their players would inevitably look for other reasons to villainize hostile, and there would be lies, there would be vitriol in world chat, there would be personal harassment that our players would react, and our players would be toxic too, even if we tried to control it. And that Relevant would never be able to completely, I guess, go up against hostile in the way that their players wanted from the leadership, and that eventually Relevant would fall apart too. And DMOC and I, like DMOC said he was concerned about that too, but he thought that, this and this and that, blah, blah, blah. So, a couple months go by, and exactly the same thing happens to Relevant. And so, like, I understand, like, I don't know, that our community, like, hostile, what it does, like the impact that us being like really competitive at contested resources and really competitive in the first clear content, competitive in clan wars, how that can basically upset players that also want to be the best and at the top of everything. But there's no reason, like, we never walk into any of these things not being sportsmen. There's a reason we post handshakes after every fight, why people in Aggression and in Relevant have talked shit about hostile players not being allowed to speak up in world chat or whatever. Like, it's because we do care about that, like, kind of respect and sportsmanship to other teams, people that we compete with, even if it means like limiting what our players can say in world chat, I guess. So now what I'm seeing, and to kind of like tie this all together, what I'm seeing is DMOC removes the most toxic players from Relevant. The players that he personally observed being toxic and personally decided that they needed to be removed before like a positive dynamic could be achieved between our teams. And so he did. Those players went to Aggression, and what I'm observing happening, and this is where I'm at, like, correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm observing happening is Jericho went from being focused 100% on his team, how he could progress his team and his players to be better, organize them better, teaching his players, training his players, looking for opportunities for his players, and basically just the growth of Aggression. It has evolved into something where I'm seeing it's like a pattern. It's an ongoing thing. The same thing is coming, and as he brings in players who are toxic, who have resented hostile for multiple games, or who, I feel like a banner is now being lifted by Jericho, and he's not going to be personally satisfied unless he basically shows to his players, hey, look, we're fucking hostile. Look, we're like, this is what we're doing. This is what makes us relevant. This is what makes us important. Like, this is what our team is. And I feel like when that happens, you kind of like lose sight of things inside of the guild. And also, like, on a kind of like side note, I feel like happiness and like like how much like personal fulfillment you can get out of a video game or anything really is based on like expectations versus like what happens, right?
Yeah.
And like, if your expectation is to cuck hostile, or your expectation is to beat a team or hurt a team or harm players that are really resilient and strong and that aren't really going to be, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Then you're consistently going to like fail to meet those expectations, and that's going to rattle and destabilize and upset more and more and more, not just you, but the players that you're like instilling those expectations in. And so that's just for me. Like, if I appreciate the competition, I would like it if it was less toxic. Our players enjoy the game more when we have teams like like Wrath and Relevant and whoever else competing. But it's just and I understand you're friends with Squirrel or whatever, and he's a clever little shit. He can be really funny, but he also makes like really, I don't know how to explain it, like disgustingly, shamelessly hurtful personal attacks against people.
Yeah, so I've noticed and so I've heard. I've been like talking to him, and he's been in Ag Discord and everything, and and I'm just like, oh, well.
And I'm not. This is a game, like you, and as far as I'm concerned, you can be friends with whoever you want. I wouldn't even try to influence that. In my own personal observation, though, like I've just seen him go after my players, and he'll say anything, like he'll throw anything that sticks. And it's not just, you have players like Kors, for instance, right? Like,
Oh my god, yeah.
Kors, he does the mudslinging, but his is like Kors isn't mean. He's not a mean-spirited person. He's not a hateful person. I think he's even like a well-meaning guy. He just sometimes opens his mouth and vomits on everything in sight, right? Like he like he's just pissed, and so he's gonna like, that's why he talks shit. It's not not trying to hurt people.
Kors, that's the thing about him though. It's just like he talks shit, but he does it too much.
Yeah, right.
And it's starting
He's
to
highly
like
critical.
Yeah, it's starting to like aggravate me, and it's getting to the point where it's like, okay, like shut the hell up. It's really annoying.
Yeah, and I mean, some people are just that way. If he wasn't talking shit about some team in a video game or whatever, he'd be talking shit about like how his newspaper is delivered. I don't know.
Yeah.
So the reason I bring that up is to like kind of like draw the disparity between his talking shit and Squirrel's talking shit. Squirrel will find a photograph of like a perfectly sweet girl or like an image of her, and then like try to use it to hurt her, right? For that, there's a different. That's bullying, right?
Yeah.
And the thing about bullying is the reason people do that. In my own experience, it's a power thing. People want to feel more powerful than the people that they're saying those hurtful things to, and lord it over them, or they try to like gather stuff on people that they can then push up against them with, and try to I don't know. It's a power thing. I don't know if in his own life he's experiencing hardship, and so goes and plays online games and fucking bullies the shit out of people. Who knows? What I do know is that, like, in my own experience, the only way to really like combat that kind of thing is to, I mean, you got to punch a bully in the face, and so you need to have power over them too. And so, like, Hostile has had players, like our own players, doxxed by enemy teams, right? Like, we've had other guilds and other players from enemy guilds do that kind of shit. I had a player. That's not something we condone or we would ever do or I would ever do. I would never have any intention of, like, if I found out someone's personal information, I'm not going to